And let's start with an opening question. And Avinash, I'm going to pick on you. So what are some key game-changing and disruptive trends in the industry? And do you think they are creating any opportunity for this region?
I think, first of all, the big thing that's happening is it's all about globalization of services. And it's not just about outsourcing to offshore places. It's just about globalization to centers of excellence across the globe. I think one of the things we are also seeing is that there's a significant emergence of captives. That means the companies do decide to keep it in-house, but not necessarily in the local locations, and they look for some global locations. So I think that's really what's happening. Now, what are some of the things that are driving this thing? If you look at the fact that technology has really moved up quite a bit. India, Philippines are very, very large scale. I mean, I think Philippines has got a BPO revenue which is very, very close to India's BPO revenue. Wow. And India definitely is a mega player in terms of IT. So that's not going to go away anytime soon.
One of the most advantages in which we have been able to position companies in the US has been that proximity, because it's proximity, not just geographical proximity, but also cultural proximity, that understanding their client, it's also important. If you consider that most of the US being one of the most important markets, and the US having in a certain way presence in the region, understanding the region, I think it's easier. But the other game changer, and I think I mentioned that before, it's not necessarily just related to technology. I think one opportunity that we also can take advantage as a region, it's the immigration reform. Again, I think I agree completely with all the things that we have to leverage, because those are game changers from a technology perspective. But the other one for the region, it's certainly the immigration reform, if you consider the US as your most important market, or the opportunities there to outsource. Because if you think about what's going to happen, again, that immigration reform will translate in a certain way for clients looking for alternatives, because they might not be able to have on-site resources from other regions, from India, for example. So I will then again agree that proximity will become an advantage and a driver that will allow us to position as one of the most important alternatives. So it's important to understand that proximity is not just about more convenience, because at the end of the day, when clients look at alternatives, it's convenience is important, being close is important, but it is more important that we translate that proximity and that similar time zone in being more productive, in being more close to the client, in understanding that, because at the end of the day, that productivity will translate into competitiveness. So sometimes we mention proximity as something that is convenient, but proximity should also translate into being competitive, into being more productive. And I think that's something that took a while for Latin American companies to understand. By being close is not the advantage, being near is not the advantage. It's translating that into productive teams.
I think we have a massive opportunity in terms of the region, and I would put it in a slightly different way. I think that the industry has started to be separated in two different big industries: the traditional IT outsourcing industry and all the revolutions and the software products that are needed to be created either by product companies like Google, or sometimes the Googles of the world need some help for that, to create those software products that will touch millions of consumers. So the game of creating software products for millions of consumers is something that is dramatically evolving, is changing from, I would say, 5-6 years ago. 5 years ago, we didn't have the iPad, and today we have, one iPad each at least. So what is happening in terms of mobility, in terms of cloud, all the revolutions that are happening at the same time, I would add one more, which is the user experience revolution. And that user experience revolution is leading into a change in how software is being created. So before, we thought that software was just created by engineers. And I would say that today, those evolutions and those dramatic changes that are leading into pushing consumers to ask more from that software is changing that from just engineers into, of course, engineers, but also designers and artists that can create appealing interfaces, that can combine that work with engineers, and of course, that they need to be very innovative to compete in the App Store, for example, against hundreds of thousands of applications when you want to publish one. So I think that the opportunity for the region is to adapt to that change and be able to take that opportunity and take it to the next level. With that, going into the automation side, I think that Internet of Things will take a very important role in the future. You could say that, now you could think a car like a massive piece of hardware for an iPhone or for a smartphone, where you can use your applications to run on top of a car. Or you can think that, automating pretty much everything today with just an internet connection and a very cheap piece of hardware. So I see a bigger impact on the automation side and on the Internet of Things side than on the big data and on analytics side. However, both trends are very, very important.
People think that in the very near future, the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, it's going to have a larger budget than the CIO. And your client and the way to approach that client, or your user, if you want to call it that way, changed. And you had to change the approach to go there. So it's something also that you have to understand, which is good, because when you thought about the kind of things that were outsourced before, they look for those big guys, like you mentioned, because scale was important. But when you think about the new user and what he's looking and leveraging those different trends that we mentioned about cloud and mobility and things like that, that's when those niche opens, because they will look for that brightest talent. As you mentioned, it will not be about scale, but about who can really provide that brightest talent. And in order to do that, yes, we have to really understand much better what they expected. For me, it was GE is one of our largest clients, and it has been for 15 years. And when a company like GE, a very traditional company, makes this kind of a statement that every company is a software company, even companies like GE, every company is a software company. If you think about that, then not just service providers but also your clients really define themselves as a software company. GE, for example, it's pushing a lot this concept of industrial internet that is related to the kind of things that you mentioned. And they are participating in huge events because they do understand how important this has become. And again, that changes the game if you understand that previously it was just about scale and those kind of tasks that didn't require really that kind of innovation. But today, it is different, right? We have to foster innovation. That's one thing that in many cases we lack, to really have those environments in which you really foster innovation. Because again, if you think about all those trends, we need that innovation, and in many cases, Latin America or we need the support to work together, universities, the private sector, the government, to create those environments in which all the entrepreneurs find the right space to really create new things.
If you look at Philippine success, the fact that two things are very good in Philippines. One is the English language, the other one is customer service. And that really made a big difference for them. Now the thing to see is, first of all, what is good for to Latin America. But I think you have to put it in the context of what's good for Latin America today. right? I mean, you can't really replicate the Y2K. It's not, this is not Y2K stuff anymore. So I think based on what we just talked about, everyone has been talking about, I know you talk about artistic, and I talk about business context and user experience. I think it's all the same thing. The few things, number one, I think clients are going to be looking for where will I be able to get, again, on changing needs. Needs will change from time to time again. Where will I be able to get the best talent in some specific element? So think about it as to when the client says, which are the 3 countries that will give me the best talent in a specific things? Now, they probably have 100 things that they need to find talent. So they're looking at a network of countries for specific things. Previously, since people didn't really know enough about where the talent was, any country that could raise its hand since we have this thing and maybe you need this thing, people would go. So here, I think try to look at where each and every country is the best at. Will you make the list in the top 5 of some talent? So that's very, very important. The second part, I think is that we talk about the social, and the mobility, analytics, cloud, big data stuff. I think that's definitely an element of disruption in this. So find as to how you can disrupt the business model of the bigger countries, of the big scalable IT and BP that exists today. I mean, how can you disrupt that? I really believe you can. If you look at the example of India, it was about Y2K, programming skills. Philippines was about English language. I think the third thing that I think right now that could probably be a very, very competitive skill that could be very key in enabling that is business context and analytics, in my view. So I think if you understand the business context, which is again user experience or the art stuff, I think that will make a big, big difference.
I think that government support is extremely important. I mean, what has happened in Argentina, as was described a few minutes ago, with 2 different laws in less than 10 years, supporting the activity is extremely important. I was very happy to know that Colombia is requesting to the Argentinian government some kind of experience on what on how this law worked to implement something similar to that. When 5-6 years ago they were absolutely against any kind of help for the industry. So that's great, and I think that's a very strong proposition in terms of having a bigger talent pool. The second tactic thing is we need to convince more of our young people to be trained and to study hard sciences. Unfortunately, in the region still the percentage of people that is studying engineering, physics, mathematics, whatever related to the hard sciences is very, very low. Compared to 60% in India, I think, and a similar number in China. 60% of the young people in China select to study, or in India select to study hard sciences. So that's also very important, and this is exactly on this room. And every person in this room should have the duty, if they are interested in this industry to grow, and you are aware of the impact that this industry may have in the future of a country, to convince every single person that is close to you and about to select their university career, to convince them to go and select a hard science career. That's very important for the region, and that's very important for the country. And third tactic, last but not least, to push our entrepreneurs, the people that are creating value for their companies and for their customers, not just to focus on price or optimization of performance, but also to focus on innovation, on creativity, on bringing new ideas and pushing concepts so we can differentiate the value of the region from other places.